If you love great stories, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Like and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. 1313 Cemetery Lane. On a vacant lot, surrounded by swamps and a moat, stands a stately, somber mansion. From the outside, the mansion is an imposing and decadent sight. The facade was covered in foliage and twisted vines. The knockers and mailbox seem to have a life of their own, like grotesque guardians watching over the main entrance. Entering the mansion reveals a labyrinth of secret corridors and hidden rooms. The interior is adorned with strange objects and macabre statues. Every corner of the mansion seems to harbor some dark secret or unique oddity. In one of the many rooms of this mansion, a conversation was taking place. The room had a gothic and eccentric atmosphere. The walls are adorned with antique tapestries and dark paintings that seem to follow you with their gaze. Hanging chandeliers, covered in cobwebs and adorned with skulls, cast a dim light that added a touch of theatricality to the atmosphere. In the center of the room was a huge stone fireplace, always burning and emanating a comforting warmth that contrasted with the somber atmosphere of the place. Two people were sitting on a black velvet sofa, a man and a woman. The woman was beautiful and had pale skin and long black hair. She wore a black Gothic dress to match her hair. The man was stocky, with a flat nose, crooked teeth, and a receding chin. He was shorter in stature than the woman next to him. His hair was slicked back, and he sported a pencil-thin mustache. Across from the two of them sat a young girl. The girl had black hair pulled back in two long braids, a fringe over her forehead, a pale complexion, dark brown eyes, and black eye shadow. The girl was also wearing a black dress similar to the woman's dress. It was like a smaller, daintier version. The only difference was that the girl had a blank and emotionless expression. On the other hand, the woman was smiling warmly as she looked at her. "My dear, how long will you stay mad at us?" asked the pale, beautiful woman. Her name was Morticia Adams. The mansion belonged to the famous old psychic family, the Adams, one of the oldest and most powerful outcast families in America. "As long as it takes. You sign me up for nevermore without my consent. I don't want to repeat the same steps as you, mother," said the pigtailed girl in a monotone and without changing her expression. Her name was Wednesday Adams. "I promise you, my little snake, you will love nevermore, won't you, my beloved?" asked the mustachioed man. His name was Gomez Adams. "Of course, it's the ideal school for her," said Morticia, nodding. Why was it for you?" asked Wednesday. "It's not about that. I mean that you'll finally be among classmates who understand you. The relationship between normies and outcasts is difficult, more so when you're an Adams," Morticia replied. "And no, you will not be going to the Academy of the Dark Arts. We've been over that subject many times," she added as she saw Wednesday was about to speak. "Nevermore is a magical place. It's where I met your mother and we fell in love," said Gomez, looking passionately at Morticia, who was also looking at him. "Stop it, I'm going to get nauseous again," said Wednesday. It was already the 10th time in the day that she watched her parents give each other passionate kisses. She'd rather stuff or bury animals than watch this. "Those things indeed creep you out, but you must be aware of what happened in Nevermore a few months ago. Attack by unknown hooded people. 2 dead. Attack by hags. I'm sure you'll love that," Gomez said with a ghoulish grin. Wednesday, for the first time, agreed with anything her parents were saying in the entire conversation. "A unique experience. Besides, I don't think it will be the last since Luke Poe is there," said Morticia with a slight smile. The Adams, as an old and powerful family of psychics, were privy to several important issues in the outcast society. "Luke Poe," thought Wednesday. Her eyes showed a faint gleam that quickly faded. "John must be very proud of his son from the afterlife or wherever he is. Who knows, maybe you'll end up falling in love with him, and together you'll get revenge on the Spellman family," said Gomez, not caring at all about the danger her daughter would be in. "Oh, a couple of revenge. It's been a long time since we did the last one," commented Morticia with a nostalgic look on her face. Don't say stupid things. All right, I'll go, Wednesday said without changing her expression. She stood up and left the room. She seems to have some interest in that boy, said Gomez. He knew his daughter, and that was extremely rare. The first time he'd ever seen anything like that. Well, it's common. That guy murdered a person. What girl wouldn't be attracted to that? Plus, he's a successful writer. His book Carrie is proving to be a big hit. Last I know, he published his second book. Even Wednesday read it. Don't tell her I went through his room, Morticia said with a faint smile. Finally, her daughter could find friends with her characteristics, although she still saw it as a long way off. He's honoring Edgar Allan Poe, said Gomez with a nostalgic look. He was John Poe's partner and friend, Luke's father. Yes, Wednesday is writing her novel, and she hasn't finished it yet. The Poe kid already published 2, and they're successful. For the first time, she must feel inferior to someone her age, commented Morticia. Her daughter was narcissistic and perfect at almost everything, except for having friends and socializing. Vermont, Jericho, Nevermore. The school had started a couple of days ago. In Principal Weems' office, a meeting was taking place. At her desk was Principal Weems, looking at 3 people, Gomez, Morticia, and their daughter, Wednesday Adams. You've had a very interesting academic journey. 7 schools in 4 years, Larissa commented, looking at Wednesday's academic report card. She was very surprised by this. Even Luke wasn't expelled from that many schools, only from 3, and he was one of the most troubled kids she encountered at Nevermore. There's no fortress that can hold me. I bet it will be the same here, Wednesday said in her usual monotone. What our daughter is trying to say is that she's very grateful for the opportunity, said Gomez, trying to disguise his daughter's rudeness. It's only been a few days since the start, but I'm sure she'll be able to incorporate it with the help of her classmates, said Larissa. We're sorry about that. Bureaucracy made it take a while to get the paperwork we needed, Morticia apologized. Anytime a student is expelled, it is recorded on their academic record and can affect their future educational opportunities. Luckily, they knew Principal Larissa and the board members. The Adamses had power and influence. They didn't send their children to Nevermore because it's a boarding school and distance. After all, psychic abilities could be taught by family members more effectively. No problem. Wednesday will go to the Ophelia dorm, the same as you, Morticia. Your roommate will be Enid Sinclair. Classes have already started. Let's introduce you to your roommates, Larissa said, standing up. My little Storm, we will keep in touch. Break a leg, said Gomez, hugging Wednesday, who didn't even move from her spot. She hated hugs, but she could only stand hugs from her father. Dear, make friends and have fun, said Morticia, who wanted to hug her daughter, but Wednesday pulled back slightly, so she stopped herself. Her relationship with her mother was more strained. Wednesday said goodbye to her parents without being too emotional and followed Principal Weems down the halls of Nevermore. She was already wearing her custom Nevermore black uniform instead of the standard indigo. Today's class is marginal history. Later, your roommate will give you a paper with all the schedules, Larissa commented. Wednesday barely nodded her head, and the walk to the classroom was silent. Only their footsteps could be heard. Nevermore was founded by Nathaniel Faulkner in 1791. He was a centenarian vampire who was highly respected by the entire American outcast community. Before founding Nevermore, he traveled the world cataloging every outcast community, explained the marginal history professor with slowness and laziness in his tone, or so it seemed. Luke found himself at the desk in the back, fighting sleep. History classes were boring. It reminded him of Harry Potter's History of Magic, which was always shown as a very boring subject because of the professor. Luckily, at that moment, someone knocked on the door, making the professor stop his boring lesson. Come in, said the professor, and the door opened. All the students looked at the 2 people who entered the classroom with curiosity, including Luke, who had his eyes a little narrowed. The person walking in front was Principal Weems in her classic professional attire. Behind her was a not very tall girl wearing a customized black Nevermore uniform. The girl had 2 long braids, a pale complexion, dark eyes, and an apathetic look. Everyone wondered who the new student was. Classes had already started a few days ago. Luke opened his eyes in surprise. His sleepiness left him immediately, and he had to control himself not to get up from the chair to look with more certainty at the very particular girl. What is she doing here? It's not the time yet, Luke thought, staring at the pale girl with a blank expression. He knew very well who this girl was. He couldn't be wrong. Wednesday Addams. Luke remembered perfectly the events in Wednesday's series that he saw in his past life. The girl was due to enter Nevermore mid-year the following year. That is, in the 11th grade. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Mayer. I have an announcement for everyone. Today, you will be joined by a new student in your class. I hope you will receive her well, said Larissa, looking around at all the students. She then looked at Wednesday and nodded to her to introduce herself. All the students looked at Wednesday, who had kept the same expression on her face ever since she entered the classroom. Silence reigned in the classroom. Wednesday Addams, said the girl dryly in a monotone, and silence once again reigned in the room. Could that be considered an introduction? She only said her name. The famous Addams family of psychics. I heard they were crazy. I never thought I'd get to see an Addams. Many murmurs were heard in the room as Wednesday finished her short, pithy presentation. Everyone knew the Addams family. The last appearance of an Addams at Nevermore was several decades ago with Gomez Addams. Coincidence or not, that time was the last time there was a Poe at Nevermore, Luke's father. Quiet, exclaimed Professor Mayer, and the hubbub ceased. Go sit in the back on the right, Mayer added, pointing to an empty desk next to Luke. Wednesday began to walk quietly. Her steps seemed to be in rhythm, and her gaze remained straight ahead and unchanged. Everyone watched the strange girl, who sat down and looked straight ahead. I guess it's due to the butterfly effect, Luke thought, looking at Wednesday, who was sitting a short distance away from him. The girl looked like the actress from the Netflix series, only her aura was darker and her gaze more intimidating. Wednesday noticed Luke's stare and turned her head as if she were a robot. She looked at him with her dark eyes, which looked like the abyss itself. After a second, she looked forward again. Her aura is very particular, thought Luke, feeling as if he were being analyzed by some kind of strange alien. When Luke pictured an outcast, he would picture someone like Wednesday, a completely different person than a normie. Larissa left the room, and the boring history class continued. Luke watched Wednesday sidelong and slyly. He wondered if the events of the series would happen this year or wait until next year. Why did she come a year and a half earlier to Nevermore? Did the events of the past year affect the Addams family in any way? He didn't know. He also didn't know if Hyde and Crackstone would be much stronger than in the series. Although this was assuming they would be, the outcast world was much more dangerous and powerful than he saw in the series. Stop looking at me, said Wednesday, noticing Luke's gaze on her. My first conversation with the leading lady of the series, and I feel like it's not going to be pleasant at all, Luke thought as he decided what to say. Excuse me, I saw your face so pale that I was worried you might faint at any moment. Maybe you're nervous about it being your first day of school and getting a late start, Luke said with a slight smile. Obviously, his apology was fake, and it was impossible for Wednesday, with her unchanged expression, to be nervous. Wednesday didn't even flinch at Luke's clear mockery. She looked at him for a second and said, "Oh, don't worry about me. My pallor is simply a side effect of a lack of interest in the banalities of everyday life. I'm not nervous in the least. In fact, you might say I'm excited to see what kind of lost souls populate this place." Excited, thought Luke. Wednesday's expression had not a hint of emotion in it. On the other hand, he was surprised at all she said in a monotone with no change of pace. How about you? Or should I ask if you have any other talents besides detecting pallor in the faces of strangers? She added, looking at Luke with an icy stare. Luke fell silent, not knowing what to say immediately. It was the first time he had been beaten in a conversation to dislike the other person. Wednesday, at Luke's silence, looked at him smugly and looked straight ahead again. Luke frowned as he was about to say something. Professor Mayer spoke up. "Student Adams, read from the title, History of Nevermore," Mayer said, looking at Wednesday. "I don't have a book, Professor. I couldn't prepare it because they didn't give me the schedules," Wednesday said, with no sign of nervousness or anything like that. "I understand. Student Poe shares a book with Adams so she can read," said the professor, looking at Luke, who nodded reluctantly. He moved his desk closer to Wednesday and put the book in the middle. "Poe, he's Luke Poe?" thought Wednesday, looking at Luke differently, though her face was still just as expressionless. She didn't think this student would be the famous writer of Carrie and the Mystery of Salem's Slots. The latter is his new novel, which is proving to be a huge success. She had read it and had to admit that his writing inspired terror and reminded her of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. "Stop staring at me," Luke whispered with a slight smile, trying to mimic Wednesday's tone. Wednesday wordlessly looked at the book and began to read where the professor instructed. Her tone was monotone and barely changed as she read. After that, the class continued. They had to read on their own. The self-study that Professor Mayer was so fond of. Luke and Wednesday read from the same book without saying a word. When the class was over, they didn't even say goodbye. Luke went to the cafeteria with Xavier and Ajax. Wednesday was approached by many curious students who wanted to meet the new student. Little did they know that such enthusiasm would be short-lived. The third class of the day was the subject, Psychic Powers II. Last year there were 10 psychic students. Because of the death of Sabrina Jones, false last name, though only Luke knew that, there were 9 students. This year, 3 new psychics joined. A boy and a girl who joined at the beginning of the year, and Wednesday Adams, who took a week to start classes. Now there are 12 psychic students. The professor's name was Charles Faulkner, descendant of the founder of Nevermore, an important family of psychics on par with the Spellmans and the Adams. "Well, class, we have a new student in our class today. I assume you already know her name, but introduce yourself anyway," said Charles, looking towards Wednesday, who internally rolled her eyes. She hated having to introduce herself in class, such a waste of time. Wednesday Adams. Her presentation was the same as in the other subjects, thought Luke, fiddling with his pencil. "Quick and concise presentation. If it's no bother, could you tell us what kind of aura you possess?" asked Charles. He needed to know this so he could guide the students. "Black aura," Wednesday replied, and everyone in the classroom was surprised. It goes along with her personality, Luke thought. Besides, Wednesday was a dual aura user, as she would shortly awaken her psychic visions. That is a violet aura. Maybe she already had her first visions he doesn't know. Luke wondered what abilities someone with a black aura would have. Because of the issue of family techniques and the fact that they are guarded, he didn't know. Maybe he should look for a book at the Nightshade Society. He would have to sneak in again, though. His relationship with Veronica had stagnated. He would even say worsened even though he spent the summer at the Umbrio mansion in Florida. Maybe it was because Veronica discovered Luke with Emily, or who knows why. "Black aura, interesting. You're the only psychic with that aura in this class," Charles said with a hand on his chin. Luke didn't know if Wednesday hadn't yet awakened her psychic visions or was hiding that she was the possessor of another aura. He would like to read her mind, but it is dangerous. Mind reading can be stopped by protective devices. Members of important outcast families will have such artifacts so that their minds are not read without their consent. If he tries to read your mind and it is exposed, they will know he has a blue aura, and he could be punished for reading students' minds on the sly. "Now that there are 12 students and you are a pair, we will make groups of 2. Choose a partner and sit together. This group will be very important throughout the year. I'll give you 10 minutes to decide," said Charles as he sat down at his desk, and the students began to talk. This is not good, Luke thought automatically, looking at Xavier. He didn't like team assignments, especially not when it would last the whole year. To his bad luck, Xavier was already conversing with a boy Luke didn't know. "Traitor," Luke thought without moving from his spot. All the students were chatting with their classmates' friends. The only two people who were still in place were Wednesday and Luke. Wednesday, from the beginning, was looking straight ahead without changing her expression. She looked like a statue. At no time did she seek to converse with anyone to fulfill the professor's task. Luke got a message on his cell phone. It was from Xavier, saying he was sorry for not being able to group with him. He had to group with the other guy because he owed him a favor. "It's okay," Luke wrote and sent the message. "Time, tell me your names with your partner. You first, Sam," said Charles with a pen in hand. Desk by desk, he was writing down the groups of two. As there were only 12 people, he quickly got to the end of the desks. "Luke, your turn. The only option left is with Wednesday, correct?" asked Charles. There were already 5 groups assembled and 2 students left. There were no more options. "No," said Luke and Wednesday at the same time. "What?" asked Charles, a little surprised at the coordination of the two. "Can I work alone?" they asked at the same time. "If you work alone, it wouldn't be a group. You are the only ones left, so you will work together." "But," began Luke and Wednesday, but were interrupted by the professor. "End of discussion," said Charles. He didn't want to argue any more with these 2 students, who, for some reason, he knew would bring him a lot of headaches. "As you know, to work in the council outcast police, you must have control of your skills and improve your power. So in the next class, we will have training. We will have a direct elimination tournament. The groups you put together will face each other," said Charles. Many students had glesparkles in their eyes. Working on the Outcast Council was the dream of many. They were especially working on the outcast police force, where the real action was, not in the bureaucratic part of the council. The council, Luke thought. The Outcast Council of America is an institution made up of a coalition of outcasts who advocate for survival and balance between the different outcast groups. It is the force of law and order, like the government of a normie community, but with very different laws. The outcast police are under the orders of the council. Most of the outcasts want to work there, as that is where the action is. For Luke, it's sort of like the Ministry of Magic in Harry Potter with a few differences. For one thing, the council does not seek to keep its existence hidden from the normies. They could do that if they set their minds to it. Luke could erase memories and create new ones for an outcast. With normies, doing that is easier. However, it is not something the outcast society seeks. To normies, their existence is confusing, and most ordinary normies think of vampires, werewolves, and the like as myths. Only the upper echelons of normie society know about their existence. This is because the outcast population is very low compared to normies, which makes their existence difficult for normies to prove. The Outcast Police has several specialized departments where an outcast could work. These are Psychic Investigation Department, formed exclusively by psychics who are dedicated to investigating and containing threats related to mental and emotional manipulation. Monster Control Department. Powerful outcasts are in charge of handling and containing dangerous creatures, such as insane hags or strange and dangerous creatures. Black Magic Department. This department is in charge of tracking and stopping those outcasts who use dark magic to attack innocent outcasts and normies. Dark magic is not forbidden in the outcast society. You become a criminal if you use it to kill innocents. Especially normies, as they would put the outcasts in a complicated situation with the normie government. The same is mental or emotional manipulation. Using it to fight or defend yourself in death matches is not a crime. A crime is if you use it to manipulate normies or innocent outcasts. Outcast Containment Department. In charge of locating and detaining outcasts who abuse their power and pose a threat to other innocent outcasts and normies. Finally, a department known to a few people, the Demon Extermination Department. As the name suggests, the task of this department is to locate demonic activity and to murder without hesitation the culprit of this. How did Luke know about this department? Because Edgar told him. In his past life, Edgar was the leader of this department, the position with the most power. To enter this department, you had to have exceptional skills, both in combat and in knowledge. Already in itself, in any of these departments, it is difficult to enter, but in this one, it is even more so. To enter any of these departments, you had to be the best of the best, since you would be facing, in most cases, dangerous individuals or monsters with demonic powers. The most dangerous of all is the Demon Extermination Department, as you are up against people with demonic powers. Luke wonders how strong someone who made a deal with a demon will be. So you'll have to know your partner to prepare for combat, Charles said. Should I join the council in the future? Thought Luke, as the class continued. With the money he earned as a writer, there was no need for him to work, neither for the Society of Outcasts nor for the normal society. But if he wants to restore the Poe family, he will have to unite to build power. Having an important position in the council would be very useful. Of course, before that, he must survive the Spellmans and show the outcast society that this family has demonic ties, which will be the family's undoing if Luke manages to expose them. The bad news is that the Spellmans are sure to have several members of their family on the council and in the outcast police force. This would explain how it is that so far no one knows they made deals with demons. As much as he didn't want to admit it, Luke was proud to carry the Poe name. He didn't want the ancient family of psychics to die because of him, which is why he's been considering rebirthing it. Besides power and influence, I'll need a wife, Luke thought, and for some reason looked sideways on Wednesday. Edgar had implanted in him very well that he needed to have psychic heirs and, if possible, 2 auras, which would make the Poe family reborn like a phoenix. Wednesday had 2 auras, and he had 3. If they have children, they would be guaranteed to have 2 auras, something super rare in psychic families. Wednesday again noticed Luke's gaze on her and looked at him. Only this time, she didn't say anything. After a few seconds, they both looked forward again. No, what am I thinking? It would be impossible to be boyfriend with this girl, Luke thought, shaking his head. From what he knew thanks to the series on Netflix and other Addams Family adaptations, Wednesday has a dark, narcissistic, and somewhat psychopathic personality. She tortures her little brother, something she claims herself, and displays several sociopathic traits. These are the adaptations he saw in his past life. In this world he lives in now, she may be darker and more psychopathic. After all, this world is much darker and more dangerous than he thought, and not everything is the same as in the adaptations. For example, there were no auras, and Wednesday only had psychic visions. Instead, here she already said she has a black aura, the first change there is in her. With all these characteristics, how would he make her fall in love? Also, he doesn't want to be with a psychopath. Although in the series, she was interested in a normie who was a Hyde, Luke thought. This seemed unreal to him in the series. With Wednesday's personality, for her to fall in love with a normie who gave her flowers and made her watch romantic movies seemed unreal. The attraction of opposites, thought Luke. He had become Enid's boyfriend, and the two were very different. He always thought that for a romantic interest, you had to find a person with similar characteristics to your own, but that didn't seem quite right. Class dismissed. Luke looked up and noticed Wednesday standing in front of his desk. The girl was staring at him with her black eyes and the same expression since she stepped onto Nevermore. "Do you want to talk about the groups?" asked Luke as he noticed Wednesday was still staring at him. Her eyes didn't even seem to blink. Since they would be fighting other psychics together, maybe she wanted to strategize or know Luke's strengths. "No, I just want to tell you not to look for me to talk about it. I alone am enough to defeat the 2 psychics. Just don't get in the way," Wednesday said in a tone that held no disdain, no arrogance. She said it naturally, as if it were a given. "Oh, well," Luke said, not knowing what else to say. Nor would he start an argument that he knew would be pointless with someone like Wednesday. He wouldn't want to waste his energy. He also had no interest in the practice battle. Last year, he took on 4 outcasts who wanted to kill him and came out victorious. Besides, he trained all summer like crazy. He didn't have high expectations of his teammates' combat power. He thought he could defeat them easily. so it's better to let someone else do the annoying work. Wednesday turned and left. Her expression changed slightly. It's weird. They usually always get angry. Curious, thought Wednesday with a slight surge of interest towards the individual named Luke Poe. As Wednesday left the room, she was intercepted by a blonde, blue-eyed girl. Her hair had blue highlights and pink highlights at the ends. "Hi, my name is Enid. I'm your roommate. Principal Weems told me to give you a quick tour of Nevermore," the girl said with a smile and a great enthusiasm that seemed to affect Wednesday negatively for some reason. Wednesday wanted to dodge and get away from Enid as quickly as possible, but Enid wouldn't let such a thing happen. The principal gave her a task, and she would accomplish it. Besides, she was to make friends with her new roommate. "I don't need a tour. Stop getting in the way," Wednesday said coldly. "How rude. I won't stop bothering you until the tour is completed," said Enid stubbornly. Wednesday stared at Enid. "Fine, be quick," she said after a few seconds. "Great, follow me," said Enid with a smile and started to walk. Nevermore was founded. "I know that. We had history class today," Wednesday interrupted Enid. "Oh, that's right. I forgot," said Enid with a chuckle and moving on to the next topic. "Welcome to the quadrangle courtyard," said Enid, introducing the central courtyard where there were many students. "It's a pentagon," said Wednesday. "Gothic and sarcastic attitude. Phew, take a breath, Enid. She's a new student," thought Enid, taking a deep breath. "I'll enlighten you on Nevermore's social life," said Enid, starting to walk around the edges of the pentagon. "I don't want to engage in adolescent tribal cliches. Tell me about last year's Poe Cup," said Wednesday. It seemed that this eager student knew about gossip. She should know in more detail about last year's incident. "Why do you want to know about that? You should know enough by now," said Enid, pausing. Her enthusiasm and smile disappeared. For Enid, it was the worst time in her life. She saw a classmate burned to death, she was almost murdered, and days later, her boyfriend left her. She was traumatized by everything that happened in so few days. Remembering those days was the worst for Enid. "I asked you why I don't know enough," Wednesday said. Nevermore took it upon himself to try to hide the important details of that incident. "Which student was it that died? How did she die? What skills did the attackers have?" said Wednesday, asking several questions and with no change in her expression as she talked about the death of a Nevermore student. Enid's eyes were widening with indignation. Her lips trembled. She couldn't believe how Wednesday could talk about the death of a fellow student so tactlessly. "I almost forgot. Is it true that Luke Poe killed one of the attackers?" asked Wednesday again. Hearing Luke's name made Enid lose the patience she was having with Wednesday. "Have respect for Sabrina's death, and if you want to know so badly, ask Luke Poe. Tour over," exclaimed Enid angrily, leaving Wednesday alone in the courtyard. Many turned to see who suddenly shouted. They were surprised that it was the always happy and enthusiastic Enid. Wednesday stood still with a blank expression. "That's the normal attitude. Well, I saved myself from the stupid tour. Maybe I should ask Luke Poe," thought Wednesday as she began to walk calmly towards her new dorm. In the dark depths of the forest outside Jericho, in a cave hidden in the undergrowth, a sinister act is taking place. The air inside the cave is damp and cold, and the sound of dripping water droplets echoes in the darkness. The floor is covered with a layer of slimy moss. The only light source comes from a single torch. In the heart of the cave, a young boy lies imprisoned by rusty chains. The boy seems to be conscious, but at the same time he is not. His gaze is empty. In front of the boy stands a woman staring at him. The woman has fair skin, long brown hair, and brown eyes. Nevermore students would recognize her immediately. It was the kindly professor of botany, Marilyn Thornhill. However, the professor did not have the usual friendly look and smile. She had a twisted smile on her lips and a cold, hateful look directed at Tyler. She hated outcasts. Finally, that damned Adams girl is at Nevermore. The prophecy didn't fail. With a few more days of torture, Hyde's brainwashing will be complete, and I'll put the plan into action, thought Marilyn with a ghoulish grin. "Tyler, honey, wake up," said Marilyn, approaching the young man and squatting down. "Mother, my head hurts," Tyler mumbled with narrowed eyes. "I know, honey. Take this. It will make you better," Marilyn said in a kind tone, passing a glass with a greenish-colored liquid to Tyler. She brought the glass closer to Tyler, who hesitated for a second. "No fear, son," Marilyn said in a loving tone. Tyler decided to drink it with Marilyn's help. He drank it all down. After a few seconds, Tyler began to scream in pain. Marilyn patted his shoulders as if that would do any good. There, take it easy. You have to be strong to help Mom," Marilyn said with a slight smile. "Yeah," grunted Tyler, gritting his teeth and enduring the pain. After that, he lost consciousness. "That was easier than I thought." What a weak-minded teenager, thought Marilyn, glaring at the unconscious Tyler. She put away the drugs she was using to brainwash Tyler and heal him a bit, as she had to send him back home. "Before I get Wednesday Addams blood, I need outcast body parts or normies. I'll use this hide for that," thought Marilyn with a slight smile. It was time to start a killing spree in Jericho. If it were up to her, she would use outcasts, but she didn't mind assassinating normies as it was easier. Outcasts might try to defend themselves against a hide, and rarely leave Nevermore since it was a boarding school. It would be great to assassinate that arrogant boy, thought Marilyn. The smile on her face disappeared, and there was only hatred in her eyes. An image of Luke Poe came into her head. This outcast always made fun of her and showed no interest whatsoever in her classes. She hated him since last year. "Achoo!" Luke sneezed. Luckily, he managed to cover it with his arm. Otherwise, he would have soiled the girl just inches away from him. "Are you okay?" asked a beautiful blonde girl with green eyes. The girl was completely naked, as was Luke, who wiped his nose with a handkerchief that came floating towards him. "Someone must be talking bad about me," commented Luke, blowing his nose. It was Saturday night. Xavier was not in the dorm as he had gone to Bianca's dorm, so Luke had the bedroom all to himself. Ever since he experienced his first time with the normie named Emily, Luke wanted to continue to have an active sex life as much as possible. With his fame as a writer and his last name in the world of outcasts, it's not hard to find a girl who wants to sleep with him. So here he is with a beautiful blonde student 2 years his senior. Her name was Kat. He only remembered it thanks to his photographic memory as he didn't care much for it. Kat had an hourglass figure, beautiful eyes, and most of all 2 big melons that were more striking than her green eyes. "Hey, don't stop. I was just climaxing," Kat said, watching as Luke wiped his nose. "Sorry, let me make it up to you," said Luke, returning to the action. A while later, the carnal act was over. "It's already 2 in the morning, thought Luke, looking at the time on his cell phone. "You better get back to your dorm," commented Luke, looking at Kat, who was hugging him and resting her head on his chest. He didn't know why women liked to do this after sex. "I don't want to," said Kat, hugging Luke tighter, who frowned. He didn't want Kat to come out of his bedroom tomorrow and for everyone to see her. Security in the men's dormitories was weak. The professors hardly patrolled at all. A girl coming out of a dorm was not uncommon to see among the students. After all, Nevermore is a boarding school full of teenagers. "I'm not giving you a choice," Luke said stubbornly. "That's too bad. A pretty girl wants to sleep with you, and you're kicking her out. The rumors of Luke Poe's bad temper are true," said Kat with a slight smile and starting to kiss Luke. "I don't have a bad temper," thought Luke, reluctantly accepting Kat's kisses. "Didn't you want to watch a movie? Now's a good time," said Kat, seeing that Luke wanted to kick her out. "Oh, that's right. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre '74. A classic," said Luke with renewed interest. Luckily, in this world, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a movie that was released just like in his previous world. He had seen this movie many times before, but it was nice to watch it and discuss the movie with someone else. He put the movie on the huge TV in the bedroom, and they began to watch it. 30 minutes later, Kat had fallen asleep on Luke's chest. This girl lasted 10 minutes longer than the last one, thought Luke, slightly disappointed. With the remote, he turned off the TV and went to sleep. He wouldn't wake Kat up to kick her out. He wasn't that bastard. He remembered the times when they had movie marathons with Enid. Neither would fall asleep, and they would enthusiastically watch the movies while eating popcorn and cuddling together. There was no sex. Luke didn't dare try it for fear that his relationship with Enid would become awkward, but he preferred those nights with Enid 1,000 times more than the ones he had with Kat or another girl these days. The next day, at about 11 noon, the bedroom door opened. It was Xavier. Today's a different girl, thought Xavier, looking at Luke's bed. The latter was sleeping next to a beautiful blonde who was hugging him and drooling a little. If he's happy, thought Xavier, sighing internally. Since Nevermore started, it had only been 2 weekends. Luke had already brought 3 different girls, a change he noticed from his friend compared to last year. Luke slowly opened his eyes and saw Xavier. They both stared at each other. "This is an illusion. You'll wake up soon," Luke said, making a circular motion with his hands. "Like I'm going to believe that, you idiot," Xavier said with a slight smile. "Tish," Luke clicked his tongue. "Just use protection. I don't want you to get syphilis or something," Xavier said in a mocking tone. "Shut up, you're not my father," Luke said, getting up. Luckily, he was wearing shorts that he put on before putting on the movie. "Hey, wake up, it's late already," exclaimed Luke, tactlessly shaking Kat's shoulder. I'm coming," muttered Kat sleeplessly. She rose slightly from the bed, exposing her chest. She was still naked. Luke quickly, with his telekinesis, used the sheets to create a wall so Xavier wouldn't see her. He didn't want his friend to get in trouble with his toxic girlfriend, Bianca. "What a gentleman. Thanks," Kat said with a cute smile as she noticed Luke's gesture. "Just change and get out," thought Luke, but he didn't say anything. He tried to control his bad temper. "I had a great time last night. Call me later." "Bye," said Kat, already dressed, kissing Luke goodbye, who nodded slightly and said nothing. "Bye," said Kat, waving to Xavier, who raised his hand somewhat shyly. The girl opened the door and left the room. After a few seconds, Xavier looked at Luke and quickly approached. "You bastard, that's one of the most beautiful girls in the senior class. How did you get her to sleep with you?" asked Xavier, grabbing Luke by the shoulders and shaking him. For a senior cutie to sleep with a boy 2 years younger than her was a very rare thing to see, or almost unheard of to see. "What, really?" asked Luke, letting Xavier shake him. It was a good way to wake up quickly, if a little rude. "Tish, you damn famous and handsome writer," Xavier said with envy, albeit the good kind. His family of psychics had a Poe-like prominence. Maybe 1 or 2 rungs below in terms of seniority and golden peak, but now his family was much more than the Poes, who counted only 1 living member. The only difference between him and Luke was his appearance. Although Xavier was confident in his appearance and was always popular, he could not be bought with Luke's looks. Second, and very important, was Luke's success as a writer. Carrie had hundreds of thousands of sales, and his second novel seemed to follow the same path of success. Luke had social networks with hundreds of thousands of followers. His fame is the biggest in Nevermore. "Don't bother, you have a girlfriend," Luke said, escaping Xavier's grip and starting to get dressed. He was hungry. "Yeah, for now," said Xavier. His relationship with Bianca wasn't getting better. It was only getting worse. "Anyway, Kat Bagnall leaving your dorm will be a rumor that will soon start spreading all over Nevermore. Be prepared," added Xavier with a hand on his chin. "Do you know her last name?" asked Luke, who didn't know Kat's last name since he hadn't asked her. "Yeah, she's one of the hottest girls in Nevermore. All the guys know it. Don't tell Bianca," Xavier said. "Maybe they'll think she was with you," Luke commented with a smile. "Impossible. By leaving at this hour, it will prove that she was in your dorm all night. They all saw me coming out of the dorms heading to Bianca's," said Xavier, shaking his head. "You do take it seriously," Luke thought. He didn't want that rumor to spread, but there was nothing he could do about it now. He could only pray that no one had seen Kat come out of his bedroom. "Let's go eat," Luke said without giving this any more thought. Monday arrived. Today would be the day for 10th graders to practice sparring. Luke hadn't spoken to Wednesday since they were in the same group. He wasn't nervous. The goth girl was supposed to take care of everything. She said so herself, and knowing her excellence in just about everything, it was quite possible she would take on 2 psychics by herself. Luke recalled, thanks to his photographic memory, that Wednesday had perfect grades and was a genius in multiple disciplines. Archery, better than him. Fencing, better than him. Engineering, etc. Of course. She is better than Luke without using auras, since with his clairvoyance aura, Luke can be untouchable in fencing or archery. With his telekinesis, he can direct the arrows and have them always hit the target. Where did she get so much time to be an expert in so many things? Thought Luke, heading to the cafeteria along with Xavier and Ajax. Luke had good grades in school thanks to his photographic memory and the fact that he was a person who was reincarnated. He is a successful writer because he copies the works of Stephen King, who is not in this world. Well, I have 3 auras, and according to Edgar, I'm a genius in battle, thought Luke, encouraging himself. His real specialty is his combat power. He trained like crazy and defeated 4 people who wanted to kill them without anyone's help. In that, he knew he wouldn't lose to Wednesday. According to his judgment, his strength was superior to all Nevermore students, even the older students. As he entered the cafeteria, which was filled with students, he noticed the gaze of many people on him. It was not the first time he felt this way. He was used to it, but today was different. There were more stares and murmurs than usual. "Here we go," muttered Xavier, and Ajax smiled slightly. They were somewhat used to the stares their friend got, but it was still a little uncomfortable being watched by almost every student. "More stares today than usual," Luke said as he grabbed his breakfast and sat down at a free table. "It's because of the other day," commented Xavier, sitting down. "What thing?" asked Luke, adding a lot of sugar to his coffee. "Have you forgotten already?" asked Ajax in disbelief. "Cata Bagnell, the rumor that you 2 slept together is already known to everyone. Congratulations," replied Xavier with a smirk. "What, that fast?" asked Luke. It had only been a day. "I was also surprised that the rumor was flying so fast. Ajax shows it to him," said Xavier with an amused smile. "Look at this," said Ajax, showing Luke his cell phone screen. Both boys looked at Luke silently, who was looking at the picture on the cell phone. "At what point did that bitch take this photo?" thought Luke abruptly, grabbing Ajax's cell phone and taking a closer look at the photo. The photo was of him and Kat. He was sleeping peacefully, while Kat was taking a selfie very close to his sleeping face as she smiled. You could tell they were both lying on a bed, and Luke had no shirt on. Kat didn't either, so she was covering herself with the sheets. "Thanks to the spread of this photo, the rumor became a reality and flew faster than ever," Xavier said with a slight smile, seeing Luke's shocked expression. In recent times, it was rare to see his friend with that expression. "I shouldn't have let her sleep with me," thought Luke, squeezing the cell phone hard. Since when do girls take half-naked pictures with a guy and spread them around? It's usually the other way around. "Hey, you'll break it," said Ajax, yanking the cell phone out of Luke's hands. Luke paid no attention to Ajax's complaints, and with his eyes, looked for the table where Enid was for some reason. He quickly found her. It wasn't hard to find the striking blonde hair with blue and pink highlights on the ends. Enid looked at it too, though only for a second. Her expression was not as enthusiastic and happy as it usually is. Luke could notice Yoko and Davina's furious glares at him. "Why did I look at her?" Luke thought, averting his gaze. His mood dropped as he saw Enid's expression. He cared little for the opinions of others, but with Enid, it was different. When he broke up with Enid, he saw her crying, which made him feel guilt and pain. Perhaps he had grown fonder of her than he had expected. Spending so many months together and sharing things caused him to have an emotional bond that in neither of his 2 lives did he ever have. He didn't think it would be so weak and affect him so much. That may be one reason why he looks for different girls and forgets about her. Although Luke doesn't want to admit that he's still paying so much attention to her after they broke up months ago. After breakfast came the first class, which was psychic powers. Finally came the day the psychic students had been waiting for, actual combat against their peers using their powers. Last year, it was all about learning about auras, ways to use your powers, etc. There was no serious combat. To everyone's surprise, the practice fight would take place on Raven Island. Luke didn't think he would be visiting the island where he killed the werewolf. The school paid more attention to Luke's class practice. In addition to Professor Charles, they were joined by two other professors, the fencing professor, Vlad, and Professor Fitz. Professor Fitz was a psychic. He was of average height, had tanned skin, and had dark sunglasses covering his eyes. He appeared to be on summer vacation, even though it was autumn. The trip to Raven Island was not in canoes like the Poe Cup. They got on a motorboat that fit about 15 people without a problem. It was much more comfortable than a canoe trip. "How's the morning going, teammate?" asked Luke, sitting down next to Wednesday, who was looking out at the river with a blank expression. Luke looked at Wednesday's outfit. Since today was a training day, no one was wearing the normal uniform. They were all wearing their gym uniforms, which were sports jackets with comfortable, stretchy t-shirts underneath. On the bottom are sports pants. As expected, Wednesday wore the all-black sports uniform with white lines. The normal one was indigo. Wednesday turned her head slowly and looked at Luke. Luckily, Luke did not invade her personal space. He sat at a medium distance, so she didn't have to turn away with a disgruntled look, as she almost always did. "Normal. I wish the sky was more cloudy and dark," Wednesday replied, going back to looking at the river. That's a better answer than I expected, Luke thought. He had thought Wednesday would either ignore him completely or tell him to stay out of the way. "Are you used to Nevermore yet?" asked Luke. He knew the answer to this question, but still he asked it. "Irritating. This school is more normie than I thought. I only come here out of obligation to my parents," Wednesday replied. Unlike the outcasts who had attended Nevermore for years, she had been educated in normie schools. She thought her peers, outcast teenagers, would act differently, but that was not the case. They still had the same interests as normies: popularity, sex, gossip, and stupid things that made her irritated. The only difference was that the teenagers here had special abilities, and there were specific subjects for that. "Is that your irritated face?" thought Luke. Wednesday's expression was the same as always. The changes in her face were barely visible since she arrived at Nevermore. For example, when Luke gets up in the mornings and is in a bad mood, he has a scowl and a grim look on his face. Although that's usually the norm for him, but more visible. "I feel the same way. I went to normie schools, and the only difference is that there are people here who can murder normies easily," Luke commented. Luke at first did not want to come to Nevermore, just like Wednesday. However, his reason was different. He hated schools in general. He didn't care if it was for normies or outcasts. However, he now thought Nevermore was much better than a normie school. Its facilities, food, and subjects specific to the outcast world were better than normie subjects. Even the people. Luke, at the end of it all, felt more in tune with the outcast world than with the normies. If he had murdered a person in normie society, he would have gone to jail and been treated like a psychopath, but here that wasn't the case. "But I ended up concluding that Nevermore is better than the normie schools," Luke added. "I don't agree with that," said Wednesday, disappointed by Luke's comment. "In the end, it's just like everyone else," thought Wednesday. "Well, people don't always have the same opinions," said Luke, making a lazy gesture with his hand. He knew Wednesday hated Nevermore because her mother had been the model and most popular student of her day, and she didn't want to follow in her footsteps. "Why did you end up concluding that Nevermore is better?" asked Wednesday after a few minutes of silence. "Because you can murder people as long as it's in self-defense," Luke replied in a calm tone, as if what he was saying was the most natural thing in the world. Although in the normie society, the concept of self-defense also existed. It was much more rigorous than in the marginal society. Many irritating procedures had to be followed once he had killed a person who wanted to kill him. In normal society, Luke would have gone to a trial to determine whether he acted justifiably and under many more problematic procedures. In an outcast society, however, he didn't have to go through all that trouble. Even an outcast police officer complimented him. The rules were different. Wednesday opened her mouth slightly in surprise at Luke's response. She thought he would tell her because of his friendship with people similar to you or something stupid cliché. She didn't think he would say because murder is easier with the outcast rules. She knew firsthand that was the case. At her previous school, Normie almost murdered a gang of girls who picked on her. She put up with their jokes as long as she could, but they wouldn't stop. So she had no choice but to act. Using the electrical wiring from one of the poles on the school campus, she electrocuted them with a simple trap. Unfortunately, people arrived to save the girls, and someone had seen her set the trap. She was indicted on multiple murder charges and expelled from school immediately. Despite the evidence she had of the girls abusing many students. Because of her family's power, nothing happened to her, but she knew that the procedure was very rigorous. Her father had to pull a lot of strings and bribe people. This would not have happened in the society of the outcasts. The law is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. "We are here, come down in order," shouted Professor Charles. Luke stood up without noticing the change in Wednesday's expression toward him. However, to notice it, you had to watch her very carefully, as the girl was an expert at keeping her expression the same most of the time. "Maybe we have more in common than I thought Wednesday, following Luke and looking at his back. Her earlier feeling of disappointment about Luke was gone. No other outcast would have given that answer. She knew that. Although they accepted death more naturally because of their rules, not everyone would talk about murdering people like it was common. "Listen up, everyone. The fights will be simple. One team will be the attacker, and one will be the defender. The attacking team must steal the flag from the defenders. Once stolen, they must leave the marked perimeter, and it will be their victory. The defending team must defeat the attackers or hold on for 30 minutes. The areas are already designated," explained Charles. "The only thing that is not allowed is deadly attacks. We have Professor Fitz who will heal you, so don't be afraid to fight and hurt each other," he added. "Whoa, they really take this tournament seriously," thought Luke, listening to all the professor's explanations. They even planted cameras all over Raven Island, so that the spectators could see each group's match perfectly. They drew lots to see which groups would face each other. There were 6 groups in total. Luke's group was number 6, and they were to face group number 2. Group number 2 consisted of a girl of Japanese origin named Tamori. She was one of the new students this year and was a transfer. Luke suspected that this girl belonged to the Spellmans and wanted to assassinate him like Sabrina, but he couldn't know unless he sneak attacked her and read her memories. The odds of her belonging to the Spellmans are low, as she is Japanese. It would be difficult to create such a real identity. Now's companion was Rowan Laszlo, a boy with brown eyes and short brown hair. The person who tried to assassinate Wednesday in the series to stop the supposed prophecy that Wednesday would destroy Nevermore. Rowan is a scary bundle of nerves, introverted, and an outcast among his peers. Luke finds it hard to think that this coward could be encouraged to try to assassinate Wednesday. Last year at the beginning, Rowan showed advanced psychic abilities compared to the others, not counting Luke and Sabrina. Along with Luke, Sabrina, and Xavier, Rowan was in the top 4 best psychic students. Luke, if he had to do a top from last year, would position Rowan in the top 3. In the top 1 would be him, followed by Sabrina, and then Rowan. However, Rowan did not make much progress compared to the other students. Luke sees Xavier's current abilities and believes that in a battle Xavier would defeat Rowan. The sky blue aura is more powerful than it first appeared. Xavier can now draw in the air itself. He only needs a brush. And his speed is much faster than last year. With this again, he realized that the series he saw in his past life of this world was unreal. That world was similar, but very weak compared to the one he is living in. The first group was Xavier with his friend Mike. They seemed to be childhood friends, although they were not as close as they used to be. Mike possessed an orange aura. Luke saw how in classes he could manipulate the earth. They were up against a girl with a white aura and a tall boy who possessed telekinesis. The professors took each group to their assigned area. Xavier's group was to defend. That too was decided by luck. This favored Xavier and Mike. Their skills were better at defending. Luke and the others watched both groups through several screens, broadcasting in real time. It was a rare sight that in a forest there were connected screens with many wires. The combat began. The attackers began to head to where Xavier and Mike were with the object to defend. The distance was not long, nor short. If they ran at a moderate speed, they would arrive in 15 minutes. They are slow. At my speed, I'd be there in 5 minutes, Wednesday muttered to herself, making plans in her head to finish the fight as quickly as possible if she was on the attacker's side. In 15 minutes, they arrived at the area where Xavier and Mike were already in position. In the time, they set up what defenses and traps they could. The two psychics did not go on the attack. They watched the circling landscape, moving carefully and trying to find their opponents who had hidden using the forest to their advantage. At this rate, they will fall into the traps, Luke said mentally. Next to him was a ghost floating with a cup in his hand. It was Edgar who was watching the battle curiously. I doubt it. Look at the girl. She's using clairvoyance to create a mental map of the area. That way, she'll know where the traps were set, Edgar commented, realizing what the girl was doing. With his years of experience and being a clairvoyant, he could figure this out with a simple glance. That's right. I didn't notice, thought Luke, noticing that the girl had her eyes wide open as she scanned the surrounding area. Her eyes had a white glow to them that Luke had not noticed before. Clairvoyance had several uses. Luke usually focused on improving his observation haki, as he called it, which served more for combat. Usually, clairvoyants don't focus on that. They use clairvoyance to get information about a certain object, person, or location, or for power reading, to know about the auras of their opponents, or to know if they are a different type of outcast. The latter worried Luke, as his clairvoyant classmate could see that Luke had 3 auras. However, the Eye of Truth is a difficult ability and is visible at the initial level. That is, Luke could see the girl with a 3rd strange eye staring at him. What relieved him the most was the technique Edgar taught him to hide his auras. In this way, clairvoyance would not be able to see that he possessed 3 auras. Luke would not hide all 3 auras. He only leaves the yellow aura visible. This technique involves conscious control over one's psychic energy, altering its vibration to make it less noticeable to the eyes of other clairvoyants. However, it is not foolproof. A more powerful clairvoyant than him could realize the trickery, and if he controls the Eye of Truth very well, he could discover his 3 auras. Luke wanted to keep it hidden that he was a 3-aura user for obvious reasons. Already being a 2-aura user was super rare. Elite psychic families would jump in a paw if they had a member in their family with 2 auras. According to Edgar, if in a prominent family of psychics, there is a succession fight between 3 siblings. If one of the siblings has 2 auras, he would automatically win the fight, no matter how young he is. That is one of the many examples of the advantages you would have by possessing a double aura. Now imagine having 3 auras. It would only put him in the eye of the hurricane. It could cause the Spellmans to send their strongest members to assassinate him, as he would become a major threat by possessing 3 auras. While Luke was thinking about these things, the combat had already begun. Thanks to the clairvoyant girl, they were able to dodge the traps set by Xavier and Mike. In addition, they knew where they were hiding, so the telekinetic began an attack. His level was at the top of level 2. The trees were very heavy, but instead, he used 3 branches that weighed a little over 150 kg. Mike used an earth dome to defend against 2 branches. His reaction was fast and accurate. As for Xavier, he managed to dodge the branch thanks to his agility and physical prowess. Although psychics had weaker bodies than a werewolf or a vampire's, they still had superior bodies to normies. More strength, more speed, endurance, etc. Nevermore and outcasts in general placed great importance on physical and martial arts development. For some reason, they learned fencing and archery, among other clubs dedicated to combat. As a viewer, Luke was so hooked on the battle that he could see it on the highest quality screens. It looked like a superhero movie. An adult army-trained normie wouldn't last 5 minutes against the psychic students who were only 15 years old. Not only did they have powers that defied logic, but their physical abilities were incredible. They looked like trained soldiers with superhuman abilities. And I already see this as normal, thought Luke with a strange look on his face. Finally, time ran out, and the attacking team couldn't take the flag. Xavier's team won by defending the base. Team 1 moved on to the next round, and Team 3 was eliminated. Professor Fitz went to heal the students, who had bruises, scrapes, and the occasional broken bone. In addition to fatigue, Luke got his first glimpse of advanced healing from a green aura psychic. He had seen Veronica, but this one was not an expert like Professor Fitz. The professor needed only a few minutes to heal everyone and make them as good as new. I hope Sabrina's bitch didn't get her eye back, Luke thought. Seeing the crazy regeneration abilities that were in this world, it wasn't crazy that Sabrina, with her family connections, could get her eye regenerated. As the other two professors were getting the area in condition for the next battle, Professor Charles slyly called Luke over, and they stepped away from the group to talk privately. "What do you need, Professor?" asked Luke, curious about the sudden chatter. "I just wanted to request of you," said Charles, scratching what little beard he had. "A professor needs to ask a request of a student," thought Luke quizzically. "Go ahead," said Luke. "Last year in your battle on Raven Island, you used a lot of roots to fight. If possible, don't use them, please," asked the professor with a strange expression. It was weird to ask a student to limit himself. Otherwise, he could easily defeat his classmates and leave the island in a bad condition, since all the tree roots can't return to the ground just like that. "I understand. I won't use my telekinesis on the roots," Luke said, readily agreeing to the professor's request. He wasn't planning on fighting anyway. Wednesday would take care of that. "Oh, thanks," said Charles, a little surprised. He thought Luke would complain more, since he doesn't seem like the kind of student who would show mercy, even to his classmates. "Let's head back. The professors should be about done tidying up the place by now," he added, as he started walking. "What is that?" thought Luke, sensing a strange presence hidden not far from where they had the conversation. He did not recognize the presence. He decided to do nothing and follow the professor. How would he explain that he sensed a hidden enemy even the professor couldn't notice? Only a clairvoyance user who can see others even if they are hidden from view and far away could notice such a presence. When they arrived with everyone else, they drew lots for the roles that each group would fulfill. Group 6, Luke and Wednesday, was assigned the role of defenders. Group 2, Rowan and Now, were to attack. Each group was taken to their designated area by a professor, while the others watched the screens. Unlike the previous bout, there was not much excitement about this match. "Rowan and Now are unlucky," commented a boy with a strange hairstyle. "Bad luck that they were matched against that monster and a very strong-looking Adams. Just seeing her expressionless face gives you the creeps," commented the lanky guy who had lost to Xavier and Mike. "Luckily, we won't be facing him," muttered a boy with fluffy black hair and brown eyes. He was shorter in stature and wore black glasses. "Don't be a coward, Eugene. That way we won't win the tournament," said a girl with pink hair and an athletic build. Her name was Rose, and she planned to win the tournament. "Wait for the flare. Once you see it, you can start moving and set traps if you wish," said the professor, as he left Wednesday and Luke in a part of the forest. In the center was a bluish-violet flag. "Why do they like the color indigo so much?" asked Luke, sitting down on a log as he looked at the flag. Indigo was Nevermore's favorite color. That's what he asked me all the time, said Wednesday, cleaning a log and sitting down while looking ahead. She looks like a doll, thought Luke watching Wednesday. The girl was relatively short compared to the other girls at Nevermore, and also quite thin. Professor Charles limited you to using your telekinesis, didn't he? Asked Wednesday after a few seconds of silence. She was there, thought Luke, raising an eyebrow in surprise. He didn't think the presence he barely managed to detect was Wednesday eavesdropping on their conversation. Thanks to his keeping his sensor active at all times, he was able to notice her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have noticed her. Also, her presence was very different from normal, so he didn't recognize her. Did you spy? Asked Luke. With this, he already knew that this was not a possible assassin sent by the Spellmans. I wouldn't call it that. Just watch what the professor said to my groupmate. I don't want to be harmed, Wednesday said in a monotone. She took every activity very seriously. She was perfect and very competitive. Whatever you say. Yeah, what you heard is right. Anyway, I won't move. You'll take care of everything, Luke said with a slight smile as he took a relaxed stance. So he can indeed move roots with his telekinesis, thought Wednesday in amazement, though she didn't show it on her face. To move roots that affect the landscape, you had to have telekinesis level 3 minimally. Depending on the roots he moved, he might already be at level 4. Not only that, most difficult of all was for the telekinetic to move objects that he could not see with his sight. Only advanced telekinetics achieve such a feat. For a 15-year-old to accomplish, it would be considered a genius who has an instinct. What Wednesday didn't know is that Luke could accomplish such a feat, because thanks to his clairvoyance, he could see the roots. Wednesday's opinion of Luke rose again. Although she wouldn't show it, she respected him more, as she too is a genius. The same was true for Luke. His opinion of Wednesday went up. He knew the black aura allowed for better stealth, but he didn't think Wednesday would have it so advanced. The professor was unaware that their conversation was eavesdropped on. On the other hand, when Luke returned with the others, he noticed Wednesday in the same place as before. At what point did she move to spy on them and return before them? It didn't even look like she had moved. She was still as a statue. For that reason, Luke dismissed Wednesday as the person who spied on him. He didn't think her stealth and speed would be that good. He figured it out since clairvoyance is the counter to stealth. Just then they could see a red flare being fired. The combat had begun. You're going up against a telekinetic and an elemental. Are you still going to do it alone? Asked Luke as he yawned. Yes, just sit tight. Your role will be a distractor so they don't take the flag, replied Wednesday, standing up. Luke said nothing and obeyed. His presence would be enough for the attackers not to try to take the flag quickly. Wednesday stood up and walked over to a large tree that had a large shadow. In a matter of seconds, she disappeared into the shadows. That ability is good, thought Luke, a little jealous. If he didn't have the white aura that allowed him to see people who were hidden or couldn't be seen naturally, he'd be screwed in a fight against Wednesday. Luke was curious about Wednesday's battle power in this world. He remembered that in the series, Rowan beat her easily using immobilization. Thanks to Hyde's attack, she managed to save herself. However, the Wednesday of this world seemed very powerful and much less merciful. Luke expanded his domain. In this way, he called upon the extrasensory ability that allowed him to see the presence of any individual no matter how much they were hidden from view or too far away to see naturally. As his radius gradually increased, Luke saw an imaginary sphere gaining ground. By the time that terrain entered the sphere, Luke could see if there were any living creatures there or not. 1 km, 2 km, 5 km, 7 km. The radius continued to expand until it reached 10 km. Instantly, he could see now First, who was running at an incredible speed, and Rowan, who had fallen behind. The distance was about 10 km, so Luke from the start could see where his enemies were. Electrokinesis, Luke thought to himself in jealousy. He had always wished he could control electricity and use it to crush enemies. A very flashy and cool power. Now powered his movement with electricity. reaching a much faster speed than average. Everyone took about 15 minutes to get here. She took only 5. 10 km covered in 5 minutes. A normie wouldn't believe this. He'd tell you you're crazy. An elite normie runner can run 10 km in about 30 to 35 minutes. Yet here outcast teenagers are doing it between 15 to 5 minutes. Their teamwork sucks, Luke thought. The Japanese girl had left her partner behind and had come here alone. Luke wasn't one to talk about teamwork, though. I don't see the goth girl, said the Japanese girl with a confident smile. Her English was good. Who cares? I'll take the flag before she can do anything, Now thought as the lightning wrapped around her, and she shot off in the direction of the flag. As for Luke's presence near the flag, Now didn't care. She was confident in her speed and knew her opponent was a telekinetic. He wouldn't be able to react, or so she thought. Luke, with his domain, could easily immobilize the girl with his telekinesis or move a branch at a speed exceeding Now's speed, but Luke wouldn't do this. He stood watching as a blur came faster and faster towards him. It had already entered the area where they were supposed to set traps. When Now was about 5 meters from the flag, black pinpricks emerged from one of the shadows made by the tall trees. The spikes almost went right through her. Now had to back up or else she would have been seriously injured. "Your speed is great, though your brains are not so much," Wednesday said, showing her presence. She looked at the Japanese girl as if she was an arrogant idiot. "Oh, there we go with the rude comments," Now said, unaffected by Wednesday's comment. "I'll toast you a bit and then take the flag," she added with a smile, as sparks flew from her fists. However, Now felt her body being frozen. She could no longer move no matter how much force she wanted to exert. Her electricity wasn't working either. At what point did this happen? What Now hadn't noticed was that the shadow of a tree behind her had extended and had come into contact with her shadow. "Oh, that technique reminds me of Naruto," thought Luke, who had watched as the tree's shadow extended to Now. The only thing different was that Naruto's character was doing it from his own shadow. Now was hard as a rock. She couldn't even speak. From her shadow, hands of complete darkness began to appear and began to bind her. Her whole body was bound like a mummy. There was only a small hole in her nose that allowed her to breathe. "A good power in the body of an idiot," commented Wednesday. "I guess teaching in Japan is lax," commented Luke with a slight smile. He hid his surprise at how easily Wednesday defeated Now. "Or all teenagers are stupid and arrogant," said Wednesday with a barely visible grimace on her hegemonic face. Luckily, Now's ears were covered by shadows, and she couldn't hear Luke and Wednesday's insults towards her and her homeland. "You're a teenager too," said Luke with a strange look on his face. "I'm different. I'm not an idiot, and I don't blindly trust my powers," Wednesday said with contempt toward Now. Although she was arrogant and considered herself a genius, she took everything seriously and wouldn't underestimate her opponents or go easy on them. "What about me? I'm different," asked Luke with a slight smile. He wondered if he fell into the categorization of different or stupid and arrogant. "Maybe," muttered Wednesday in a tone Luke didn't hear. Just then footsteps and a shaky voice were heard. "No, I'm late," said Rowan with sweat and leaves on his uniform. Wednesday stopped talking to Luke and looked at his enemy. She had to defeat him quickly and end this match. Rowan was sweaty and short of breath. He had run as fast as he could to try to keep up with his teammate, but to no avail. He was now at a 2-versus-1 and fatigued from running so fast. "What do I do?" wondered Rowan nervously as he looked at Luke and Wednesday. He noticed a mummy with black clothes, most likely his teammate. Wednesday, with her indifferent face, began to walk slowly towards Rowan, who focused his attention on the pale girl. "If I defeat her, the darkness will disappear and Now will be released," thought Rowan, starting to act. Using his hands and vision as a focus, he lifted a large number of objects from the ground. Stones of different sizes, branches, etc. "Level 2, Luke thought, slightly disappointed. If Rowan was at level 3, he could move an entire tree. Unlike the trees in the Jericho forest, the trees on Raven Island are less heavy. About 250 to 300 kg is the lightest. From 1 second to the next, all the objects shot toward Wednesday, who stopped her march and moved her hands in a circular motion. The singular thing was that her hands had a dark energy. A black shield covered Wednesday from the projectiles launched by Rowan. No projectile was able to pass through the shield. Many objects passed through Wednesday and headed to where Luke was. As the projectiles were about to hit Luke and the flag, they suddenly stopped. The projectiles hovered in the air and, a second later, fell to the ground. Even his control of many objects is bad, thought Luke, who had stopped Rowan's projectiles with just his eyes and without any effort. If Rowan had had better control, he could have sent all the objects to a particular point on Wednesday's shield. Maybe that way he could have broken it, but many of the objects were deflected and not aimed at Wednesday. Holy crap, thought Rowan as he saw the unpolluted dark shield. He didn't even notice that Luke stopped the objects without any difficulty. Otherwise, his fighting spirit would be all over the floor. The black shield vanished. The alarming thing for Rowan was that Wednesday had disappeared. Luke had watched as she vanished in an instant through the shadows. Wednesday materialized behind Rowan. She emerged from her shadow, and before he could react, she delivered a sharp blow to the back of his head, knocking him unconscious. She travels in the shadows. That's how she managed to spy on us and get back so fast, thought Luke, again jealous of this incredible ability. It was like teleporting, though still not as broken. That girl is good. It was to be expected from an Adams, said Edgar in admiration of Wednesday. He watched the whole fight. The pale girl's moves were flawless and perfectly executed. She defeated 2 psychics her age in a matter of minutes. Even though she didn't take them on in a 2-versus-1, it was still a difficult feat for psychics of that age, except for Luke. Yeah, muttered Luke. He hadn't expected Wednesday to have such high strength compared to Rowan. She beat him in a few breaths. In the series, she had been defeated easily, but here it was the other way around. Her scary attitude I like. Make her your girlfriend. I'm sure she's better compared to the girls you sleep with, Edgar commented. A girl with a peculiar personality, a black aura, and also belonging to the great Adams family. It's a great match for his offspring. Most important of all, her talent is very high, just like Luke. What the hell are you talking about? Asked Luke with a grimace. To Luke's chagrin, he couldn't hide the necklace outside his room. So Edgar could have come out at a time when he was with one of the girls he slept with this last time. As for having Wednesday as a girlfriend, it seemed impossible to him. Who the hell would have the patience to woo this girl? As for the series of Wednesday he saw in his past life, Tyler the Hyde, he managed to win Wednesday over to some extent and kiss her. However, Luke no longer believed in that series in this world. There were many differences. For one thing, it was already a miracle that Wednesday would notice a normie guy like Tyler, who gave her roses and made her watch romantic movies. What are you thinking about? Asked Wednesday, approaching Luke, who was still sitting on the log and arguing with the ghost of his great-great-grandfather. Nothing, replied Luke, getting to his feet. Let's go, said Wednesday, starting to walk to where the other students and professors were. We'll leave them here, asked Luke, following Wednesday. Let the professors take care of them, replied Wednesday, not caring about the unconscious Rowan and Now. The latter no longer had the darkness bindings, but had been knocked unconscious. Perhaps she was afraid of the dark. What a nice classmate, thought Luke, floating Rowan and Now. He took them to the professors to be attended to, even though they had almost no injuries. Xavier and the other students watched this fight with their mouths agape. They thought the monster was Luke, but Luke did nothing. The Addams family goth girl flawlessly defeated Rowan and Now. Another monster made it to class, thought Xavier with a strange expression on his face. After Luke's fight, although he barely did anything, it was the turn of Eugene Ottinger and Rose Winslow's group versus a boy named Nick and another boy named Arthur. Luke looked at Eugene, a secondary character he saw in the series. He had known him for the past year and had spoken to him a little. The boy was in a club by himself and was a loner. He had so little presence that sometimes he forgot he was his classmate. His aura is blue. In the series, he used a type of telepathy to control the bees, Luke thought, without being very interested in Eugene's ability. Controlling animals by being a telepath isn't hard. If you can command humans, you can also do the same with animals that have less complex brains than a normal human or psychic. This is another branch of mind control, an ability that is not easy to control as a telepath. Luke has already mastered controlling animals or insects. It's not much of a challenge for him. He managed to control the thought of Sabrina, a psychic with 2 auras. Doing it on animals was easier. The hard part would be controlling the animal or insect for a long time to make it do what you want, but it's not hard if you practice enough. Eugene's teammate was a green aura user. She had a fit, athletic build, very different from the average girl. She has muscles in her legs and a shapely back. It wasn't exaggerated to the point of not looking like a woman. The girl was taller than Eugene. Also, she had a better physique, as Eugene had a belly. On the other team, a boy named Nick also possessed a green aura and had a muscular and tall physique. The boy named Arthur possessed a violet aura, very useless in combat like this, so he was allowed to carry his personal weapon, which was a kind of dull wooden spear. Possessing a violet aura does not give you any useful combat skills, so Arthur could be considered the weakest of the lot. However, knowing that he had honed his combat skills and physical condition. Green aura, thought Luke enviously. He was very envious today. If he could choose to have another aura, he would choose green. Anyone who knew Luke, a 3-aura user who wanted to have 4, would be banging their head against a wall. Most psychics only have 1 aura. At first, you may think that someone with a green aura will only be a healer who is in the rear. However, this thought is a big mistake. It not only serves to heal people, but it also serves to strengthen yourself. That's the best thing. You can improve your strength, strengthen your bones, and regenerate yourself, heal yourself in the middle of a battle, and even regenerate from serious injuries if you achieve an advanced level. A base psychic has greater strength than a normie. A psychic with a green aura would be considered a superhuman, unlike the other psychics. There are limitations, but you can become very strong physically with that aura. The combat began. To Eugene's bad luck, he had to attack, which disadvantaged him as his physical condition was not very good. However, his teammate did not let him down like Now did with Rowan. When they reached the flag area, an intense fight broke out between Rose and Nick, 2 green aura users. The physical power of both was monstrous. They wounded and healed themselves without stopping fighting. Arthur faced Eugene, while the other 2 fought. Since he had no useful aura for combat, he had long since improved his martial arts. Physically and experience surpassing Eugene, who had a frightened expression as he dodged the attacks. He's weaker than I thought. He still doesn't have the mind control ability of humans, Luke thought, shaking his head. If he had that ability, he could make Arthur stop his attacks with a simple command. I know what you're thinking. Mind control is a tricky skill, and more so in the middle of a battle, said Edgar, noticing Luke's disappointed expression. I managed it in a death match, commented Luke, remembering his battle with Sabrina in the gym. You are a special case. Remember, even Veronica didn't master it like you, said Edgar. That's right, said Luke. Veronica, unlike Eugene, was considered a double or a genius. As everyone expected, Eugene lost to Arthur. His current abilities were useless in combat, and his physical condition was deplorable. He had no use for telepathy or photographic memory if he controlled it at all. After that, Arthur helped his teammate defeat Rose, who endured a lot but was defeated in a 2-versus-1. Her strength was similar to Nick's. If anyone else interfered, it would be difficult for her to emerge victorious. Finally came the final round. There were only 3 groups left. Professor Charles explained to them that they would face each other in a pitched battle. The last member standing would win. They didn't take much pain with the rules. Each group was taken to an unknown area. This time, no one knew where their enemies were. They had to look for them by their means. There were 3 groups, a total of 6 people. A flare appeared in the sky. It was the signal that they could start moving and search for their enemies. This time, the distance was over 10 km, unlike the first stage. 1. "I'll go that way," Luke said to Wednesday, as he started walking towards a random direction. Wednesday said nothing. She started walking to the opposite side of Luke. She no longer cares what Luke does, as it doesn't affect her. She just has to defeat the 2 groups and she will win. It doesn't matter if they defeat her teammate. Luke walked casually through the forest, as if he was taking a stroll. He had decided to stretch his muscles a bit. He could put into practice everything he trained over the summer, although he didn't expect his opponents to last long. "I'll just use the yellow aura," Luke thought with a slight smile. Neither haki, nor mind control, nor any ability from the blue and white auras. 9. "Although it will take longer to find them without using my domain," Luke thought, shaking his head. He began to walk around haphazardly. The area wasn't large either, as the round shouldn't take more than an hour. "Looks like Group 4 already found their prey," commented Professor Fitz, who was looking intently at the screens. On the screen could be seen a considerable distance from Arthur and Nick, who had located Luke, who was walking aimlessly. Nick was carrying a pair of binoculars and was observing the panorama hidden in a bush. "Where did he get binoculars?" asked Now. Since there were many screens, she didn't always pay attention to Nick. "We hide useful objects in random spots," replied Professor Charles. "Useful objects that would be useful for locating enemies, among other things." "Great, get that guy's ass kicked," said Now with a vindictive smile. Although she had nothing against Luke, he was on the team of the goth girl who defeated her in a crushing way and said rude comments to her. Now wanted Wednesday to lose. So, Luke the goth girl's teammate was supposed to lose, so he can't help her, and the odds of her losing increase. "You don't know anything," commented Rose, shaking her head with her eyes closed. 1. "What do you mean?" asked Now, offended at being treated like an idiot. "You don't know anything about Luke Poe's reputation?" asked the clairvoyant girl, joining the conversation. "Not much," replied Now. She had heard some things, but not that much. In last year's incident, Luke had been on Raven Island when the hooded attack happened, but she didn't know more than that. She got into Nevermore this year, and she came from overseas. "Watch and learn," said Rose, and looked back to the screen where Luke was walking towards the ambush that Nick and Arthur had set for him. "Don't be quiet after that," exclaimed Now indignantly, but Rose and the clairvoyant girl ignored her. Luke walked calmly, unaware that an ambush was waiting for him a few meters away. As he had deactivated his domain, he only had his normal vision and his ears. In the blink of an eye from a bush nearby, Luke came out a person running towards him at high speed. He held a wooden spear in his hands and was running at full power. In a few breaths, he would collide head-on with Luke. It was Arthur. "AHHHH," shouted Arthur as loud as he could. He didn't trust this tactic much, but his friend Nick convinced him. 1. The scream had a purpose. From a bush behind Luke, out came Nick running at top speed. With his green aura, he had enhanced his normal outcast biological capabilities. His speed was much greater than his teammates. However, Luke detected someone behind him. His ears were still that of an outcast, unless it was a black aura user like Wednesday. He would hear footsteps approaching him no matter how much someone shouted. Nick and Arthur's tactic wasn't all bad. Luke had little time to react. If he decided to use immobilization, he could only use it on the person in front of his eyes. That is, Arthur. So Nick would have a free hand to hit him. However, they did not know that Luke could immobilize both of them, even though Nick was not in his vision. That is if he uses his domain, which allows him to see people who are not in his range of vision. Since Luke only wanted to use his yellow aura, he wouldn't do that. He created a force field around his body to defend against both attacks. A barrier. "I knew it," thought Nick with a smile on his face. He had bet that Luke would use a barrier to defend against both attacks. "Take that," shouted Nick, punching with his fist that had veins sticking out of it. He was relying on his superhuman strength to destroy the barrier. Arthur swung his spear at Luke. Nick's fist collided with the force field with a dull sound, followed immediately by Arthur's spear impacting from the front. However, instead of shattering or weakening, the telekinetic shield absorbed both blows with an almost serene calmness. In a simultaneous burst, a shockwave emanated from the shield, expanding with overwhelming force. Nick and Arthur were thrown backward with irresistible force. They flew several meters through the air until they crashed into a tree. 4. The professors and other students watched the fight in disbelief at how easy it was for Luke to defend himself without even moving from his spot. "That's a shield that manages to repel its enemies," thought Charles, amazed at the effectiveness of Luke's shield. "Damn, why is he so strong?" thought Arthur, getting to his feet. Although they were sent flying several meters, the force wasn't that much. He only felt a little pain in his back. He was still in fighting condition. Before Arthur could think of what to do next, he noticed that Luke had already reached his side. "What the hell is that speed?" thought Arthur in shock. Luke's speed was faster than Nick's, a green aura user that enhanced his physical abilities. With the speed coming, Luke closed his fist and punched Arthur's face, breaking his nose in the process and knocking him out. Only one left, thought Luke, feeling a slight pain in his fist. How was he so fast? Just as he could move objects at rapid speed, send people flying, or fly himself, he could use telekinesis to move faster while running. 3. As if the wind itself would help him run faster. Only these are much more powerful telekinetic waves and much harder to control. A telekinetic fighting at close range, thought Nick in disbelief. The professors and other students thought this too. Usually, telekinetics don't fight in close combat. Why would you do that if you can control many objects and crush your opponent from a distance or send him flying like a rag? As for defense, there were several options: immobilization, force field, etc. Using the same method, Luke quickly reached Nick's side and began his attack. He had been trained in martial arts by Natasha. His attacks were aimed at weak areas of the body. His bones are tough, thought Luke, feeling his fist shaking as he hit Nick. If he kept hitting Nick, he would hurt his hands. He might even break the bones in his hand. 1. "Wanting to fight hand to hand with me," growled Nick in annoyance as he slammed his fist into Luke. Because of the proximity, Luke would no longer have time to create a barrier. He could easily dodge the blow with his observation haki, but he didn't plan to use it. To Nick's surprise, the direction of his fist was deflected by an external force. His fist missed, passing just short of Luke's face. Luke took this opportunity and swung his fist at Nick's face again. However, this time, he concentrated and created telekinetic energy bands that wrapped around his arm until they reached his fist. 2. "Let's see if you can take this," thought Luke, pushing his fist into Nick's face. 1. A gut-wrenching crunch echoed through the air as Nick's nose snapped, and several of his teeth flew in all directions. The force of the blow threw him through the air like a rag doll. Nick's body flew several feet before crashing violently into a tree. Because of the speed at which he was flying and Nick's sturdy body, the trunk splintered and broke. Nick fell to the ground, unconscious, surrounded by the wreckage of the shattered tree. "Oh, I thought I had held back long enough," thought Luke, seeing the mess he had made. He approached the unconscious boy and breathed a sigh of relief that he was still alive. 1. The professors and students gawked at what had just happened. They never thought they would see that the punch of a telekinetic would generate such destruction and send their enemy flying. "Your technique is very efficient," praised Edgar, looking at Luke as if he was a growing monster. The punch Luke threw was a technique he created himself over the summer. He called it telekinetic helix. Spinning telekinetic energy around his limbs drastically increases the power of his punches. The technique works like a drill. 14. Although he had to rack his brains to find the right way to manipulate telekinetic waves, he stole the idea from an anime he watched in his past life. Its name was Mob Psycho 100. 6. However, he had to do a lot of experiments to succeed, since in the anime, they don't explain the method to achieve such a technique. So, Luke is not ashamed to say that he created this technique. "Thanks, it's the first time I've tried it on a human, and it's very effective," said Luke, satisfied to test his technique in a battle. Best of all, he didn't use all his telekinetic forces in that blow, so the power may be greater. 1. "I'll look for Wednesday. She should be taking on Xavier and Mike. I could help her to annoy her a little," Luke thought, expanding his domain. He already tried the technique he wanted. Now he would annoy Wednesday a little by helping her. He knows the girl hates that and has nothing better to do. 2. You can read 15 chapters in advance on my Patreon. Link, https://www.patreon.com/nath07. Comment. 29 comment. Vote. 1 left. Chapter 70, Winners. Luke was satisfied with the battle. Even though it didn't last long and was easy, he could test his new telekinetic abilities, all focused on making him strong in close combat. 7. He is increasing his speed and strength with telekinetic waves and deflecting attacks by manipulating the trajectory of the blows with telekinesis. 1. Add to that his observation, haki, and mind control abilities, and he would be mighty in combat. He no longer just relies on crushing you with an object weighing 1,000 kilograms or more. He knew it was rare for a telekinetic to fight that way, but he didn't care. It was more exciting to fight that way. He could fly, and from that safe place bombard his enemy with objects, but what fun was that? That is as long as he knew his opponent was at his level or below. If he is facing many opponents or a strong person, he prefers the tactic of flying and using objects to crush his enemies, or if he doesn't feel like fighting and wants to finish the fight faster. Luke finally found the presence of Xavier, Mike, and Wednesday, although the latter was harder to see because of her aura of darkness. They were in combat, and from what he observed, Wednesday had the advantage. "Don't beat them yet," thought Luke, starting to run at full speed. With the help of his telekinesis to propel himself quickly, he managed to spot his gothic teammate elbowing Mike in the face and knocking him out. The area where they had fought was not in the best condition. The ground had been tampered with by Mike, a tree was cut in half, and there were several pits. Wednesday's appearance was not perfect, although she was not in a critical situation either. Xavier and Mike's teamwork had made things more difficult for the goth girl compared to their first fight, but she already saw victory close at hand. Only Xavier was left with a cut on his shoulder and fatigue from the fight. Xavier took advantage of the opportunity that his now unconscious companion had created for him. In his hand, he held a whip more than 20 meters long. With all his might, he lashed out at Wednesday, who was far away from him, but his whip covered that distance quickly. Wednesday clicked her tongue internally. This student's damned whip was the hardest thing she faced in this fight. It wasn't a normal whip. Xavier created it from nothingness itself. It was fast and unpredictable, as well as very resistant. She couldn't destroy it no matter how hard she tried to cut it with her powers. Luke had already acted. He telekinetically controlled a tree branch and used it as a shield to cover Wednesday. The whip shattered the branch, but managed the second needed for Wednesday to fade into the shadows and appear behind Xavier, who no longer had time to retract the whip. "Surrender," said Wednesday in a monotone. In her hand, she held an all-black knife pointed at Xavier's neck. "I lose," said Xavier, letting go of the whip and putting both hands up. The sharp knife disappeared, and from some speakers that had been set up by the professors earlier came Charles' voice. "Winner Group 6, go back and get Mike," said Charles, ending the practice bout. Wednesday looked at Luke. Her expression was not happy at all. "I didn't need your help," said Wednesday, resuming the walk back. Even if the whip had hit her, she had already thought of a tactic for after that. 1. "Not as much fun as I expected," Luke thought without argument. He had imagined Wednesday would be more annoyed, but her face was still the same as ever. No expression and no emotion whatsoever. "It's true, you didn't need to help her," Xavier complained, walking towards Luke. If his friend hadn't helped her, he could have defeated Wednesday, even if he wouldn't have won the fight, since he knew he couldn't beat Luke. "You would have been my teammate," Luke said with a faint smile. 1. Tish, grudge, said Xavier. Luke, with his telekinesis, floated Mike, and together with Xavier, they went back to where the professors and students were. Professor Fitz was already healing Arthur and Nick. Nick was in the worst condition. Because of Luke's blow, he lost several teeth and his nose was broken, in addition to some broken ribs. You had no mercy, commented Xavier, seeing Nick's condition. Luckily, he ran into Wednesday first before Luke. It's a new technique. I don't control the power well, said Luke, scratching his cheek. He had already reduced the power, but it wasn't enough. Now looked at Luke with a cold sweat on her forehead. She felt dread at the thought of almost getting close to Luke in the first round and attacking him. It would have been too bad for her pretty face to be hit like that. 1. The group match is finalized. Luke and Wednesday's group is the winner. We will give them their rewards later, said Charles, and the losers sighed in disappointment. 2. They all wanted to win for the rewards. Plus, they would get better grades in the subject if they made a good impression. It was good practice, thought Luke, satisfied. The reward he was most interested in was the use of the VIP bathroom. A bathroom that only class reps could use. To be a class rep, you have to be democratically elected. So you must be very popular, which Luke is, but not in a good way. He is popular, but not sociable. Each year there are 2 representatives, 1 male and 1 female, not in the specific classes of each type of outcast. That is, you must compete with those of your age from all species of outcasts. The current representatives for Luke's year are Xavier and Bianca, the most popular couple of their year, although Luke believes they don't have much time left as a couple. In addition to the use of VIP bathrooms, there were more rewards. Use the swimming pools when you feel like it. Usually, to use them you must ask permission or be in the swim club. The last reward is 2 days off where you can leave Nevermore. They must be on weekends only, where you can visit Jericho or whatever you want. As Nevermore is a boarding school, to get out you need to ask for permission and a valid reason. Usually, you don't get permission. 1. Luke was given it for his interviews as they were work-related, or when there was an important event in Jericho. They let all the students out. Maybe I can visit the Italian restaurant, Luke thought, remembering a new restaurant that opened in Jericho. Although he wouldn't have Natasha's permission because of the Spellman thing, blah, 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 blah. 5. On the way back, Luke received several stares from his companions. They were all still amazed at his strength, but mostly at the way he fought. Wednesday also received many stares for the strength she demonstrated. The girl, since she got on the boat a couple of hours ago, still had the same expression as always. Luke didn't know how she did it. She didn't look tired, irritated, and of course not showing a hint of joy at her victory. He defeated those 2 first than me, thought Wednesday as he watched the river. She was not at all happy about the rewards. 3. She was slower than Luke in defeating a group, and she didn't like that. Although she considered Xavier and Mike more trouble than Arthur and Nick. Especially since Arthur didn't have an annoying ability like manipulating the earth and didn't even have psychic powers useful for combat. Besides, he helped me, thought Wednesday, remembering how the tree branch covered her from the whip. For the first time on her face, a slight frown could be seen. She knew Luke helped her to annoy her. She knew how to see that annoying character from the first day she met him. In the first fight, he didn't move a muscle. It was strange that he suddenly wanted to help. The only thing I can do is train, and next time finish my fight faster than him, Wednesday thought, returning to her stoic expression. It was the first time she had encountered a worthy opponent who had skills on par with her, a feeling she had never felt before. 3. That same day, Luke received a metal plate that served him to open doors like the one in the bathroom. A VIP badge. He would have it for a month. So many amenities in the palm of my hand, thought Luke, looking with a slight smile at the badge. He knew the bathroom had a jacuzzi and was very large. He would have a luxurious and comfortable bath today. 1. Hey, Veronica, I need something, Luke said, sending a mental message to his cousin. Having a telepathic link was very useful, and neither of them had broken it so far. "Luke, what do you want?" asked a surprised Veronica, who was typing on her laptop. It was the first time she had spoken to her cousin since the summer. The last time she had seen him was in his rented house, sleeping with a normie, something she didn't like at all. "I was wondering if you could get me some Nightshade Society books," Luke said. It was just a small favor. Several seconds passed, and he got no response. "If you want to use the Nightshade Society's library so badly, join it, womanizer," said Veronica angrily, and severed the telepathic link. 1. Luke immediately felt the link was broken. His face was in disbelief. What happened? He knew his relationship with Veronica had stalled, but it wasn't for him to call her a womanizer and cut the link either. "Tish calls me a womanizer, and she has sex in a sacred place," Luke thought in annoyance. 7. He should find the books somewhere else or go back to stealing them. He wanted to find information about the black aura to learn more techniques and how this aura works. 2. He also wanted information about the hide. Now that Wednesday had arrived at Nevermore sooner than he thought, Professor Normie's plan might be in motion. He had to know the strength of the hide in this world that was much more dangerous than the series he saw in his past life. Thanks for watching this episode. Like, share, and follow for more interesting stories and narrations. Thanks a lot.